The lawyer's office smelled like old leather and fresh betrayal, and Elena watched her Aunt Victoria sign the final papers that stripped her of everything except a condemned barn on 12 acres of nowhere. She was 19, broke, and grieving a father whose death 6 weeks ago had been ruled accidental, and the only thing she had left was a structure everyone agreed should be demolished. What none of them knew, what she didn't know yet, was that the barn held proof her father had been murdered, and that the woman smiling across the mahogany desk had ordered it done. Victoria didn't look like a villain. She looked like success: tailored gray suit, perfect blonde bob, diamond earrings that caught the afternoon light. She was Elena's father's older sister, the pharmaceutical executive who'd built an empire while he'd chosen teaching and research. She'd arrived at the funeral with sympathy and left with control of the estate. "Elena, sweetheart," Victoria said, her voice smooth as poison, "I know this seems harsh, but your father's debts were substantial. The medical bills alone exceeded $200,000. The house, the accounts, the vehicles, everything has to be liquidated. The barn is all that's left, and honestly, it's a liability. If I were you, I'd sell it to the county for demolition and move on." Elena's hands shook in her lap. She'd spent the last 6 weeks watching her father die in a hospital bed, watching him fade from the vibrant professor who'd raised her alone into something frail and confused. The doctors said it was sudden organ failure. Rare. Unexplainable. He'd been 52 and healthy 6 months before. The barn was important to him, Elena managed. Her voice sounded small in the big office. It was a storage building, Victoria said, and there was an edge now, barely perceptible. On land that's landlocked and worthless. He held on to it for sentimental reasons I never understood. But sentiment doesn't pay bills. She slid a card across the desk. "When you're ready to sell, call this number. They'll give you fair value. Until then, you have 72 hours to vacate the house. I've already arranged for the estate sale." Elena left with a single duffel bag, her father's research notebook, and keys to a barn she'd never even seen. The drive north took 4 hours through October rain that turned the world gray and indistinct. The GPS led her off the highway onto county roads, then onto gravel paths that barely qualified as roads at all. The town nearest the property was called Millstone, population maybe 2,000, the kind of place that looked like it had been declining since 1985. She stopped once for gas and felt the weight of stares from locals who knew immediately she didn't belong. The property sat at the end of a rutted dirt road that climbed through pine forest and into hills. The barn appeared through the trees like something from a nightmare. It was massive, easily 60 feet long, but sagging in the middle, the red paint faded to rust brown, the roof patched with mismatched materials. The main doors hung crooked on broken hinges. Windows were either boarded or shattered. The whole structure leaned slightly to the left, as if the hill itself was rejecting it. Elena sat in her car as rain hammered the windshield and tried not to cry. This was it. This was what her father's life had been reduced to. This was her inheritance. She'd brought a tent, a sleeping bag, a camping stove. The barn had no electricity, no water, no heat. That first night she slept in the car with the doors locked and woke to cold so deep it felt personal. Morning brought weak sunlight and the reality of her situation. She had $1,100 in her checking account. No job. No family except Victoria, who'd made it clear Elena was a closed chapter. And a property that was going to kill her if she tried to stay here through winter. She spent the first 3 days just trying to make the barn safe enough to enter. The floor was rotted through in places, exposing dark earth below. The loft had partially collapsed. Birds had nested in the rafters, and something larger, raccoons maybe, had made a home in the back corner. She worked with gloves and a crowbar and a growing sense of hopelessness. On the 4th day she met Sam. He pulled up in a truck that had seen better decades, a toolbox rattling in the bed. He was maybe 40, with dark hair going gray at the temples and hands that looked like they'd built half the county. He didn't get out right away, just sat there looking at her like he was deciding something. Finally he rolled down the window. "You're Robert's daughter." It wasn't a question. Elena nodded, her throat tight at hearing her father's name. "I'm Sam Cordero. I did work for your dad. 11 years ago. He hired me to reinforce this barn. Asked me not to tell anyone about it." He paused. "I'm sorry for your loss. Your father was a good man." "Did he say why?" Elena asked. "Why he kept this place?" Sam shook his head slowly. "He said it was insurance. Said someday it might matter." He looked at the barn, then back at her. "You planning to stay?" "I don't have anywhere else to go." Something shifted in his expression. "Then you're going to need help. I charge $40 an hour, but I'll work with you on payment. First thing we do is make sure you don't fall through the floor and break your neck." Over the next 2 weeks, Sam taught her how to survive. They patched the roof, shored up the floor joists, cleared out the debris. He brought a generator and space heaters. He showed her where the old well was and how to prime the pump. He didn't talk much, but when he did, it mattered. One afternoon, as they were pulling up rotted floorboards in the center of the barn, he said, "Your father used to come here at night. I'd see his car on the road sometimes late, after the work was done, like he was checking on something." Elena thought about the notebook she'd inherited. It was full of her father's handwriting, chemical formulas, trial data, names she didn't recognize. He'd been researching something in the months before he died. Something that had made him anxious and secretive. He'd always told her the same thing when she was growing up. Truth lives in the foundations, Elena. When everything else falls apart, look to what's holding it up. She thought he meant moral foundations. Character. Now she wondered if he'd meant something more literal. The break came during a storm in early November. Rain had been falling for 36 hours straight, and the ground around the barn had turned to mud. Elena was inside trying to seal a window when she heard the crack. It was loud and deep, like a tree splitting. The floor in the center of the barn, the section they'd been reinforcing, gave way with a sound like thunder. She ran to the edge and looked down, expecting to see earth. Instead, she saw concrete. The collapse had revealed a reinforced hatch set into a concrete floor that shouldn't have existed. The barn had no basement. No foundation except the posts it sat on. But there, 3 feet below the rotted floorboards, was a sealed steel door with a keypad lock that glowed faint red in the darkness. Elena called Sam. He arrived within 20 minutes, soaked from the rain, and stood at the edge of the hole staring down at the hatch like it confirmed something he'd suspected. "He built this," Sam said quietly. "Your father. He had me reinforce the barn structure above it, but he did the underground work himself. Brought in equipment at night. Paid me to keep quiet and not ask questions." He looked at her. "I think you need to see what's down there." The keypad had 8 digits. Elena tried her birthday. Her father's birthday. Nothing. Then she thought about the notebook. The dates he'd circled. The numbers that had seemed random. She tried one sequence, then another. Truth lives in the foundations. She tried the date the barn had been built. 04151987. The keypad flashed green. The hatch released with a hiss of equalized air. Sam helped her pull it open, revealing a ladder descending into darkness. Motion sensor lights flickered on as she climbed down, and Elena found herself in a bunker that was clean, dry, and impossibly organized. The room was 20 feet square, concrete-lined, with a ventilation system that hummed quietly. The walls were covered with filing cabinets, bulletin boards, and a desk that held 3 computers still running on backup power. And on every surface were documents. Medical records, autopsy reports, chemical analysis, photographs of people, dozens of them, with dates and names written beneath. Internal memos from VitaCore Pharmaceuticals, the company Victoria ran. And in the center of the desk, a letter addressed to Elena in her father's handwriting. Her hands shook as she opened it. "My dearest Elena, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and Victoria has done exactly what I expected. I need you to understand what I found and why it got me killed." The words blurred. She sat down hard in the desk chair and kept reading. 3 years ago, VitaCore ran clinical trials for a drug called Norovex, an immunosuppressant meant to prevent organ rejection. The trials were rushed. The data was manipulated. 47 participants died, not from their underlying conditions, but from complications directly caused by the drug. Victoria knew. She authorized the data falsification. She paid off investigators and buried the deaths across multiple hospitals to avoid pattern recognition. When the FDA approved Norovex anyway, VitaCore made $800 million in the first year alone. I discovered this by accident. One of my former students was a research assistant on the trial. She came to me before she died, gave me her records, begged me to do something. I spent 2 years collecting evidence, everything you see in this room. I was going to go to the federal authorities. Then Victoria found out. "Elena, I'm being poisoned. Slowly. Systematically. The symptoms match arsenic exposure, but I can't prove it without tipping her off. If I'm right, I have maybe 3 months. I've hidden this evidence where she'll never think to look." The barn was never about storage. It was about insurance. The rest of the letter detailed everything. Passwords for the computers. Contact information for an FBI agent named Sarah Chin who'd been informally monitoring VitaCore for years. Instructions on how to secure the evidence and how to protect herself. At the bottom, he'd written, "Truth lives in the foundations. I built this for you. Finish what I started. I love you." Elena sat in the bunker for an hour, reading files, looking at faces of people who died because Victoria wanted money. 47 people. Names, lives, families, all buried under manipulated data and corporate machinery. When she climbed back up to the barn, Sam was waiting with coffee and a look that said he'd expected something like this. "It's bad," Elena said. "How bad?" "Murder. Multiple counts. Fraud. My father was poisoned because he knew." Sam's jaw tightened. "What do you need?" "I need to copy everything and get it to the FBI. But if Victoria finds out I'm here and that I found this, she'll do to you what she did to him," Sam finished. "Then we move fast." They spent the next 12 hours digitizing everything. Sam brought equipment from town, scanners, external drives, a laptop with encryption software. They worked through the night, photographing documents, copying files, organizing evidence into chains that even a distracted prosecutor could follow. Elena called Agent Sarah Chin at dawn. The woman answered on the second ring, and when Elena explained who she was and what she'd found, there was a long pause. "Your father came to me 8 months ago," Chin said. "He had preliminary evidence but said he needed more time to build the case. Then he died and the investigation stalled. If you have what you say you have, we can move immediately. But you need to understand, Vitacor has resources. Your aunt has connections. You're going to be in danger the moment they know you're a threat." "I'm already in danger," Elena said. "She took everything from me and thought I'd disappear." "I'm not disappearing." Chin gave her instructions. "Secure the physical evidence. Upload the digital files to a secure server she'd provide access to. Stay at the property. Agents would be there within 6 hours to extract both Elena and the evidence." But 6 hours was too long. Victoria's car appeared on the dirt road at noon. Elena saw it from the barn window, a black Mercedes that didn't belong on rural gravel moving fast. She called Sam immediately. "She's here." "Chen's people?" "Not for 4 more hours. Then we buy time." Victoria stepped out of the car in heels and a coat that cost more than Elena had ever owned. She walked toward the barn like she owned it, and technically she didn't, yet. But Elena could see the calculation in her eyes. This wasn't a social visit. "Elena," Victoria called, her voice carrying across the mud and rain-soaked ground. "We need to talk." Elena stepped into the barn doorway, making sure her aunt could see her but keeping distance between them. "About what?" "About your future. About poor choices and what happens to young women who make them." Victoria stopped 20 feet away, her smile thin and cold. "I know you've been talking to people. Asking questions about your father. I'm here to help you understand that some questions are dangerous." "Like questions about Norovex?" Elena said. The smile vanished. "You don't know what you're talking about. I know about the 47 people who died. I know you falsified the trial data. I know you've been murdering anyone who got close to the truth." Elena's voice was steadier than she felt. "Including my father." Victoria's face went blank, and that was somehow worse than anger. "Where is it?" "Where's what?" "The evidence. Robert was always meticulous. If you know about Norovex, you found his files. Where are they?" "Somewhere you'll never touch them," Elena said. Victoria took a step forward. "You stupid girl. Do you think you can threaten me? Do you think anyone will believe you? You're 19, broke and grief-stricken. I'm a respected pharmaceutical executive with lawyers who eat people like you for breakfast. Then why are you here?" Elena asked. "If I'm not a threat, why come personally?" The question hung between them. Victoria's hand went to her coat pocket, and Elena's heart stopped. But what Victoria pulled out wasn't a weapon. It was a checkbook. $500,000, Victoria said. "Sign over the property, sign an NDA, and walk away. You'll never have to work again. You can start over somewhere far from here. You're trying to buy me off." "I'm trying to save your life," Victoria said, and for the first time, her voice held something like honesty. "You don't understand the people involved in this. Vitacor isn't just me. There are investors, board members, government contracts. You can't win this fight. Your father couldn't, and he was smarter than you." "He was also better than you," Elena said. "And he did win. He just didn't live to see it." Victoria's expression shifted. "You already sent it. You sent the files." Elena didn't answer. She didn't need to. Victoria's hand went back to her pocket, and this time she pulled out a phone. She made a call, brief and coded, then hung up. "You have no idea what you've done." "I've finished what my father started," Elena said. "And in about 3 hours, federal agents are going to arrest you for murder, fraud, and conspiracy." 3 hours? Victoria repeated. She looked at the barn, at the hole in the floor, at Elena. A lot can happen in 3 hours. The sound of another vehicle made them both turn. A black SUV came up the road fast and 2 men got out. They weren't dressed like lawyers. Sam appeared from the side of the barn, and he was holding a shotgun. "That's far enough," he said, his voice carrying across the yard. "This is private property and you're trespassing." One of the men reached for something and Sam fired a warning shot into the air. The sound was deafening. "Next one goes center mass. Try me." Victoria's composure cracked. "You're making this so much worse than it needs to be, Elena. Just give me the drives. Give me the physical files. We can still walk away from this." "No," Elena said simply. "We can't." The standoff held for 30 seconds that felt like years. Then the sound of helicopters cut through the air, distant but approaching fast. Victoria heard it too. Her face went white. "That's the FBI," Elena said. Agent Chin didn't wait. She moved the moment I sent her the files. The helicopters came in low over the trees, and the black SUV tried to leave, but 3 unmarked cars blocked the road. Agents in tactical gear poured out, weapons drawn, voices shouting commands. Victoria stood frozen in the mud, her perfect exterior finally shattering. Agent Chin walked up to her personally. "Victoria Harmon, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, multiple counts of criminally negligent homicide, obstruction of justice, and fraud." They cuffed her. Victoria didn't resist, but as they led her to a car, she looked back at Elena. "You have no idea what you've destroyed." "I do," Elena said. "I destroyed you. The rest happened in waves." Federal agents secured the bunker and cataloged everything. The story broke within 24 hours. Major networks, investigative journalists, congressional hearings. Vitacor's stock collapsed. Board members resigned. Families of the 47 victims filed lawsuits that would take years to resolve. Victoria was denied bail. The evidence was overwhelming, meticulously organized by a dead professor who'd known exactly what he was doing. The trial lasted 6 weeks. She was convicted on all counts and sentenced to 40 years in federal prison. Elena inherited everything. Not just the barn, but her father's real estate, his life insurance policy that Victoria had tried to hide, and eventually, the settlement money from Vitacor's bankruptcy proceedings. It came to just over $12 million. She could have left. Could have sold everything and started fresh somewhere new. Instead, she stayed. The barn became a memorial. She and Sam rebuilt it properly, turning it into a center for families affected by pharmaceutical fraud. The bunker remained exactly as her father had left it, preserved as evidence of what happens when one person refuses to look away from the truth. On the anniversary of her father's death, Elena stood in front of the barn at sunset and thought about foundations. About truth. About the fact that her father had spent his last years building something that would outlast him. He told her truth lives in the foundations. He'd been right. The truth had been buried beneath rotted floorboards and corporate lies, but it had survived. And so had she. If this story moved you, hit like and subscribe for more stories where justice finds a way. Share this with someone who needs to know that one person with the truth can bring down an empire.